Want to bring in Illinois Republican Adam Kinzinger, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Air National Guard. Sir, thank you for your time on this Sunday. And those pointed comments on Friday in England were quite something from the president. Is that something that you see emerging from tomorrow's meeting, sir?
I think it's certainly possible. It's probably the easiest thing on the table. I'm a little worried about the deal I see shaping up in Syria potentially and what that could mean long term. And obviously with Ukraine, well, because they're talking about, in essence, just a buffer zone of Iran away from Israel. And we would have to trust the Russians to do that, to compel that. These are the same Russians that said Bashar al-Assad got rid of all his chemical weapons, and then he used chemical weapons. These are the same Russians that, said that they're not invading eastern Ukraine, that it's just some spontaneous thing that came up from the ground, and we know they're Russian soldiers. I don't trust the Russians, and frankly, their military and Russia itself is not as powerful as we think. They don't even have the ability to enforce that, much less the fact that we've seen elements of the Iranian regime dress up as Assad regime soldiers. So how do you enforce it? So I think a nuclear deal could certainly be probably the easiest, because all you really have to do is extend it. But when that's said and done, we have to deal with INF violations that the Russians have too.
Yeah, and that's a sticky point here, because the U.S. has accused Russia of cheating on that deal for years now.
Yeah, that's true. And I think they can come out and say, look, we've extended it another 5 years. We can do that without Congress and the Duma. So done. We'll deal with the INF violations separately. I think that's certainly possible, and that should be celebrated. I think that's the easiest to do, because 2,200 nuclear missiles or 700 and 1,550, that is still enough to destroy the world a number of times. So if we can limit it at that's great. But there are a lot of really deep issues, and I think the president's right to meet with President Putin, but hopefully he comes out of that from a strong position. We know where each other stands, and we can go from there and figure out how to make this world safer, and it's certainly not going to be through trusting Russia.
Do you see one winning over the other tomorrow? Break it down more simply. How does President Trump come out of here tomorrow with a strong hand? Take that first.
I think if he comes out and says we extended the nuclear proliferation treaty, that's a good thing, SALT. I think if he comes out and says we're working on a solution to Syria, that's probably a good thing. Again, it depends what that solution looks like. It only could create more terrorists potentially. Russia, by the way, is responsible with the regime for about 500,000 dead Syrians, and they bomb hospitals every day in Syria, so they're no peacemaker there. And then if we can begin to reduce tensions in eastern Ukraine, as well as if they even talk about the fact that Russia still occupies a third of Georgia, these are all big issues. That would be a victory for the president. Putin, no matter what happens, will declare victory in Russian media just by meeting with President Trump. So I think both sides will probably come out and say we won or we made these gains. That's normal. What's going to judge this is when I'm on your show in a year from now and we look back at what actually was accomplished over the next year.
Wow, fascinating then. We'll hold on to this interview then. On the issue of Crimea, that's when things really went south in 2014, 4 years ago. John Huntsman, the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, was here in Helsinki earlier today. And on Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace asked him about the hint at one point as to whether or not Crimea will be accepted for the Russians to keep for good. Here's that exchange.
Can you assure our viewers, can you assure the American people that the president will not recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea, that he will not pull U.S. troops out of Syria, and that he will do nothing in this meeting to weaken the NATO defense alliance?
The president's a chief negotiator, not me. He has a good sense of what these issues are. He has a good sense of where he wants to go. He wants to improve this bilateral relationship, and he wants to find ourselves on the same page in some of these common interest areas.
Now, how about the common interest areas, sir?
Well, I think, the ambassador is good at understanding that he's probably not going to be able to predict what Trump's going to say in that meeting, and so he's I think, playing it correctly there. But we cannot accept Crimea ever as part of Russia, because then you have to accept a third of Georgia as part of Russia. And then Russia's going to say, well, let's just go ahead and take Estonia back. That used to be part of the Soviet Union. And so we don't invoke Article 5, NATO. That destroys NATO. And then we have to accept now Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and all these former Soviet republics. We have got to stand strong and say we can be a partner of peace with Russia, but Russia has to change its behavior. Stop bombing hospitals. Stop invading your neighbors because you want to rebuild the Soviet Union. Union, and we can have a better relationship.
Sir, appreciate your time today. Thank you on this Sunday afternoon.
Anytime.
Adam Kinzinger, the Republican from Illinois, back in his home state. Thanks. We are